live here, LENSEC Live, What's Your Perspective? And I'm Neil Haley, and I'm excited about another great episode live here. Remember to visit lensec.com/live to catch up with all the live broadcasts. I'm excited to welcome program first, my co-host, Keith Harris. Keith, how are you? And we have another great guest today.
Yeah, good to see you, Neil. Everything's going great on my end.
Oh, I'm excited to chat, and you've had a busy week of trade shows, and we're getting back to normal, the new normal, right, Keith?
Yeah, we had the school facilities and safety congress that went on this week. So we were pleased to participate and talk with lots of school districts at that event and get connected with them. So it's been a great week so far.
All right, well, fantastic. We're going to learn a lot about this. Our guest, so I'm excited to welcome to the program Jamali, and Drake is from SIA. Drake, thanks for stopping by. How are you?
Hey, appreciate it. Thanks, Neil. Thanks, Keith. Happy to be here.
All right, Drake. So let's kind of just jump into specifically your background in physical security. When did that start?
Sure. Yeah. So I started with SIA about 2 years ago now as the manager of government relations. Primarily leading our state advocacy initiatives. This kind of helps bring together member companies from around the country to engage on issues, ranging from school security, cybersecurity, data privacy, biometrics, and alarm systems, just to name a few. And this kind of involves, tracking legislation developments that are relevant to the industry and our over 1,100 member companies. So this kind of has been kind of my portfolio for the last 2 years, and also working with, our federal advocacy folks in our GR department as well. So it's kind of how it all started.
Wow. And it's interesting when you talk about that spot, when you first got that position, you've learned a lot new things about security, especially those initiatives, right? Of different types of security and how physical security depends on different vertical markets, right?
Right, exactly. And it's interesting, but before I even entered the industry, I was doing kind of economic policy in Illinois for the governor's office. And I wasn't, I guess, didn't realize how nuanced the industry is and kind of all the different players that are involved. And even when I'm in a space, I don't realize how much technology actually goes into, access control, security cameras, this kind of stuff. So it was just really interesting starting an industry to realize the depth and the gravity that it kind of that it has in the U.S. and globally.
When you start walking around and looking at cameras that are in the corners of every place you go and thinking about all the access card readers and
right.
microphones these days everywhere, there's a lot going on. And it's funny when you get in the industry and you start to notice these sort of things, just how much is out there.
Right. And to that point, it's interesting. I know which company the security camera is now. I know it's an access camera or, something like this. So it's kind of funny to now I know the differences. So my friends think it's a little weird, but, it's definitely something, a little party trick, I guess, if you will, for that.
My wife always walks in and says, "Who are you spying on today?"
Yeah. Yeah. Especially now. Yeah. Everyone's kind of mentioning that, but it's all good and fun. But yeah, it's interesting to kind of be a part of the, a large industry and also one that's innovating constantly. So it's really good to be part of that discussion and to kind of understand all that.
So now, how did you get involved thinking about this cannabis vertical market? Because that's our topic today. And to understand for our listeners and viewers out there that might not understand what a vertical market is, you can kind of explain it more, especially being from SIA.
Sure. So, kind of what we've seen, especially, in the past couple of years, especially since 2016, we've kind of seen like a green wave, if you will. A lot of states have actually legalized the recreational use of cannabis. And so it's been becoming a larger and larger industry. And we'll probably see that, going forward as well, just with kind of different states seeing that it's kind of a new revenue system for them. And also, the fact that, more Americans are uncomfortable with cannabis being legalized medically and recreationally. So we've seen that this being an emerging market and one that's some, very unique requirements. A lot of SIA members in the security space have indicated they wanted research and resources to kind of help guide them for future business opportunities. And that's kind of been where I stepped in, and kind of where we, or at least SIA, stepped in to kind of, get through the noise and the nuance and kind of just have a straight state-by-state guide on security requirements and how our members can kind of get involved in this space. So whether that's, how much square footage a security camera needs to cover in a certain space, where they need to be placed, how many locking door mechanisms there need to be. Also, surveillance if it needs to be 24/7, this kind of stuff. So we've seen a lot of our members really kind of craving this information to understand it more broadly and in depth. And that's kind of something that, as SIA in the security industry, we saw very valuable for them. So that's kind of how we fell into it. And it's exciting as well. It's something I've never really covered before. And it's really interesting to kind of get in there and see, at least my home state of Illinois recently just legalized recreational cannabis, and kind of understanding their own requirements and how it differs from Maine and California and so forth. So it's an interesting topic.
Yeah, you have like going from 2016 to 2020 is kind of like going from the wild, wild west to, implementing marshals to cover.
Right.
I mean, we're just now starting to see some of these guidelines come into place, and some of these standards become more well balanced across the board. You have lots of policymakers talking about a variety of different things from state to state. So you still see a lot of variance between the states. You see a lot of variance between what the needs are for medical marijuana versus recreational marijuana. But as we progress through this process, we really get to a more finely tuned product in terms of marijuana policy and security for that. So what was that like for you, working your way through that process and helping SIA come up with some of the guidelines that they've been able to implement?
Right. So I think the first big state, right, to legalize was Colorado. And I remember this several years ago. Everyone was kind of skeptical of it. And, it was, how are they going to regulate this? And, from state to state, someone goes to California, can they buy it and then legally leave? So I think we saw California as, a little microcosm of what it would be on a federal level. And I think a lot more states kind of saw that, especially with, the revenue that they were receiving, that it was kind of applicable to them. And they then designed, using Colorado as a baseline for requirements regarding how big a facility is, how many people can work there, what security measures there might be. And some localities also put more security requirements, such as you have to have security personnel there, such as a guard. I know this kind of differs in California from city to city. And so it was tough initially to kind of, read through these 200-page documents that states, of course, the red tape would put out there. But luckily, with kind of Colorado, California being the guiding lines for a lot of other states like Illinois, Maine, Massachusetts, you can kind of at least piecemeal it together that this is all the same. Here are the differences. And I think that's where a lot of our members were curious about. They knew maybe the broad guidelines, but each state and some localities are totally different. So that was kind of something we thought we'd be the forefront of. So,
see, that's interesting when you talk about all that, because then it's going to depend state to state what the rules are regarding how you make sure that you're secure, right? Because they don't want certain things to happen to the crops, and then when they're finally processed, they don't want criminal activity to be involved in it. So there are different things. So these guidelines are a process, right? Because it's just like even in the school industry, in the schools, they have all varying rules from state to state. So you had to look at all that while writing the guidelines, right?
Yes. I mean, there's kind of three, I guess you could say, security parameters, right? So you have one for kind of the growers, then you have one for the manufacturers of the products, and then the third one is the dispensaries. So you kind of have this 3-rung system. So for a farm, a cannabis farm, you have to have a fenced perimeter. You have to have security cameras for those. Only people with ID badges can go in. No one can take anything out that's not already permitted. This kind of thing. So then you have that portion. Then the transport of the marijuana plant or the cannabis plant to a production facility. That's another parameter. You have what kind of cars they can be in, who can drive them. So it was a whole process, kind of looking at every different state's requirements, but they tend to have a similar thread. And I think that was kind of, I guess, the silver lining in all the pages and pages of regulations that they put in place. That was kind of nice. But yes, you're right. The U.S. is a 50-state quilt. It's all different patches, and you kind of have to see where the thread kind of meets. But that was kind of the challenge. But I think our cannabis guide is one of the broadest and most informative guides out there at the moment. So I think our industry is very, very happy to have that resource.
This guide is kind of new. You guys just published this recently, correct?
Yeah, we just published it over the summer. So it was a long-term project. We started it, I think, in the fall of 2019, but then, kind of with, the pandemic that has kind of encapsulated a lot of folks, especially in the nonprofit world and also the security world, kind of got a little sidelined, but then luckily this summer, kind of buckled down and looked to finish it and published, I believe, in July. So got there for almost 2 months now. So getting some traction.
What's the high-level overview of what people are going to find in the security guide? I'm assuming it's designed and made for security integrators to source so that they can build a business around preparing customers for their security needs when they're dealing with cannabis.
Right. So overview, it's a centralized informative informational guide state by state on requirements in the cannabis industry where applicable, and it covers recent federal laws, regulations, and legislative actions regarding the use and production of cannabis, and it kind of delves in a little bit deeper on the state side because that's kind of where all the action is at the moment. The federal government's kind of punting it a little bit. But on the state side, it's an overview of state laws regarding cannabis, including which states have legalized it, decriminalized it, or have allowed medical use for cannabis in each state. So we kind of looked at the legal side of it. So there's a 12-state deep guide into kind of how they regulate the industry along the 3 common security requirements, along with comprehensive security regulations. And so that's kind of where we delved in, and there's, mandatory requirements and some are a little bit more suggestive, but, it involves in the areas including video surveillance, access control, alarm systems, and security personnel. So kind of the bread and butter of the security industry, and especially for our members, those are the big areas for them. So that's kind of where we thought this would be the most useful for them, especially in some of these big states, like California being a large market, Illinois now, Michigan, Nevada, Oregon, and several others, of course. But and we're looking at 2020, constantly updating the guide with 2020. There's going to be more states on the docket that are looking to legalize recreational use as well. So that's something to kind of look forward to, as it's kind of a live document, which is nice.
When you think about video surveillance, what types of things do you see involving using video surveillance in the guide that kind of guides you on what security cameras should you have, how should you store information, what should it be done? Should it be in the cloud? Should it be on a server? What kind of cameras can you use? All that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Right. So from all what we've seen, I think the standard issue is 1120p video camera. Some require a little bit higher resolution, but that's kind of the standard. And then it all is with backed up servers in like a secured vault. So what's interesting about that is that some of these dispensaries, which are very small, I'm not sure if you've ever been to one, but they're very small, but in the back room, it's basically like all security footage storage. So, because they have to be on 24/7 at all times, and they have to, constantly be surveilling every single hallway, every single corner. So sometimes these facilities, dispensaries, marijuana establishments, they have dozens of cameras in them because they have to be compliant with these mandatory requirements by basically having a point of focus on and everywhere. So it can see what employees are doing. It can see what people who are going to the dispensary can do. And we've kind of seen that would be, of course, fruitful for the video surveillance industry, being that, all these facilities have to have dozens of cameras at all times and be on servers. Now, there's some, of course, the cloud, but I think at the moment, because the industry is a little more analog, a little bit, they like the servers just because it's easier accessible and for them as opposed to the cloud. And then they also have to store for up to 60 days. So it's kind of, a big front for a lot of these dispensaries, which are small shops, but that's kind of how the industry has kind of been regulated at the moment.
Do you see any difference between the route or the need for security at medical facilities, either production or dispensaries, versus recreational production and dispensaries? But what are the differences that some of the things that you're seeing there in regards to the need for good security?
So it's actually in most states it's relatively the same, and they kind of just expand upon what they would normally do. So, for instance, Vermont is a very, very small state. It's only got 4 permits for facilities, and they would only actually get more permits if they have more people getting medical licenses or recreational use.
Okay.
And that's what you've kind of found, that states really just, they take the existing security parameters for medical dispensaries, and then they kind of make it larger for recreational use, but that's only if there's more use. So Colorado, California, they've expanded, but smaller states like Vermont, which only have, I believe it has like less than 700,000 people, doesn't have to expand. So you've kind of seen a weird stagnation there. But with, of course, more individuals and more products coming out, you'll see probably more permits, and you'll probably see maybe kind of a stricter guideline, especially in the dispensaries, because you're having non-authorized personnel come in and buy things, as opposed to at a farm or at a manufacturing facility where it's only employees there. So you've kind of seen more security cameras, more access control, maybe 2 separate alarm systems just in case the power goes out at dispensaries, as opposed to the other 2 rungs of the supply chain.
Right.
What's interesting, and you talk the comparison, they go for medical, then they look to go on to hopefully recreational use. So it's that process through different laws and different things involved. But the thing I look at in this process is people who are in the industry, they're probably not very familiar with some of physical security, right? That's why this guide is so important to them, because sometimes they run into situations where, hey, we know of cameras, but we don't know about how you link those to access control, how you make sure the motion, how you make sure you can retain video for a certain amount of time period. So this is all really new stuff for a lot of people that are in the industry, right?
Yeah, exactly. And just kind of reaching out to different groups, advocacy groups, also consulting groups. Cannabis security consulting is kind of booming at the moment. And we worked with a few groups to, gather information, kind of see the process. I mean, these medical marijuana establishments or recreational establishments, a lot of them don't even know what kind of cameras they need to use. They don't know what kind of access control. They just think a door needs to lock. They don't understand that there's a larger alarm system that kind of goes into it. And I think that's what's interesting, that you're seeing a lot of folks, integrators, especially working with the cannabis industry, which is totally separate, and then the security industry. So you've seen a lot more collaboration with the two. And I think going forward, there's a lot more, of course, trade shows that are happening, SecureCon being one of them out in California. that is bringing the two industries together to kind of educate, because people who sell the products don't necessarily know about cannabis. People in the cannabis industry don't necessarily know about cameras. So I think it's an interesting kind of new cooperation that's happening, and we're seeing it kind of come to fruition now.
Yeah, one of the questions that I had was specifically in regard to retention of video. I think you mentioned one stat earlier about 60 days. We've heard of some that are requiring years of video retention. Years. Now, your average security project that's not cannabis related is typically shooting for about 30 days of storage.
Right.
But you guys are seeing a much greater amount with a much larger number of cameras. So the retention required for most of these places has to be an enormous amount.
Yes, exactly. And I think that's why I think a lot of people thought that once it became recreational use, that a lot of these, establishments would kind of explode just because that, there's a lot of demand. But the issue is that with the requirements, it kind of, pigeonholes a few establishments because they're the only ones that can, one, afford the space, get the permits necessary, actually have the consultants come in, the integrators come in and, install everything. And then, of course, manage it all. And I think that's why you've seen, a few things there. Vermont, I just mentioned, there's only 4 establishments at the moment there. But I think that as more states start to look at legalization and recreational use of cannabis, that maybe you'll see a little bit, less parameters in certain areas. And hopefully that will kind of help the industry be a little bit more manageable, especially for some of these smaller businesses in different states. But it's odd. It's mostly 30, 60 days that they have to require on these servers. But I believe that, some law enforcement advocates wanted, years of information just, in case there's an incident that happened, a year ago, that they could access that information. So you're kind of seeing, different groups kind of want different things, but at the moment, it's been around 30 to 60 days from what I've seen.
The guide will provide all the different things. So explain a little bit more in detail the layout of the guide and how people kind of utilize that and where they can also find that.
Sure. Yeah. So, the guide starts with what I was speaking to about it a little bit earlier, but yeah, the guide starts with, of course, federal laws, regulations, and it kind of goes into state by state guides on basically all of the medical and recreational cannabis use required in about 11 states, plus the District of Columbia, which have legalized recreational use. So it goes state by state in that format and kind of lists, what does it require for a medical establishment, what is required for a recreational establishment, and, the surveillance guides, the access control guide. So it's pretty extensive, and it kind of looks at, what the requirements are state by state. And you can find that actually on our website at, I don't know if I should say it, but www.securityindustry.org. And you'll find the cannabis guide information on our website. So that's,
yeah, we would absolutely point people towards that resource. I think that's a great resource for them. Through all of your research and your work on this cannabis guide, any standout stories that really stick out as unusual or interesting?
Standout stories. Oh, that's good. I wish I had something on the top of my head. There are several. I could probably look back. I would just say that it's interesting, kind of where you've seen recreational use become legalized. So it's been mostly kind of, the coastal regions. But one funny story is Alaska. And I think Alaska being one of the states that's legalized cannabis use, they're kind of the frontier. They kind of have this, idea of, freedom to kind of, as long as you're not bothering anybody, it's fine. So I think it's just interesting to see how these initiatives, how these legislation has been passed. And I think Alaska being just kind of its own area, own region of the U.S., it's just very unique, being that you wouldn't think Alaska, of all places, would legalize recreational use. but yeah, I mean, I should get back to you on that with some more stories, but that's just initial top of my head.
We'll definitely have you back on about a lot of the other things you do, Drake, but where do you see the trends? Where do you see things in this industry? I mean, because you talked about how many states that legalized it, either for medical marijuana, which I covered the International Cannabis Conference in Pittsburgh a couple of years ago, and it was very fascinating to see that process, not expecting more states to follow suit like Colorado. And now more and more are looking for not just for medical reasons, but to make it legal, the legalization. Do you expect more states to be doing this in the next couple of years in the trend?
Yes. Most definitely. I mean, as I said before, there was a green wave, if you will, in 2016 with 8 out of 9 states legalizing recreational use. It was on the ballot in 2016. And now you've kind of seen maybe a second green wave coming this November in 2020 with states like Arizona, South Dakota, New Jersey, Montana. So you're seeing the trend, which was coastal, is now kind of going inwards into the center parts of the U.S. Also, Mississippi has a medical cannabis bill up for the ballot as well in November. So you're kind of seeing that it's becoming more palatable. It's becoming more appealing for a lot of states, especially American populace in general. I believe over 60% of Americans support legalization of cannabis. So I think that you're seeing this trend, and I think that by 2020, 2024, it might be the vast majority of states that legalize recreational use, as opposed to just the 11 that have it right now. So. And with that, of course, you're going to see more regulation, better definition of security requirements on these businesses, increased spending on security in the legal cannabis market as it continues to grow. So that's of course good for the industry. And then of course this pressures, or maybe not pressures, but it kind of influences federal regulations, which that will be interesting to see. What kind of happens if the federal government's going to actually step in, and I guess we'll find out more come November what the make out of that will be. But it'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Meeting with you in early December to see how things are swaying. In that direction.
I mean, we're hoping on the state side, we're optimistic. On the federal side, we're just kind of just waiting to see what happens. So state side looks good though.
Exactly. And when I think of things, where it's going to go and everything, it's going to be where a lot of the security industry is still not thought of it as a major vertical. And I did ask that question, but I'll define vertical markets. Vertical markets, some people don't understand that. And at least I didn't know it before I started working for LENSEC. A vertical market is the different industry. So specifically, there's an education vertical market. There's a healthcare vertical market. Somehow cannabis is becoming its own vertical market. It could go under, the big facilities, but no, it has its own vertical. So it's a different market there's a tech market, different verticals. So kind of want to define that vertical for our listeners and viewers to kind of understand more. What else are you doing, Drake? You're with SIA, and you've been involved in things involving education too. So you're still kind of looking at policies for a bunch of different things with SIA, right?
Right. So on the state side, we're looking at a broad range of issues. I mean, of course, cannabis being one of the newer ones, but kind of our bread and butter is the alarm industry with licensing, regulations, limitations. So that's a big thing. Also, biometrics is kind of another thing that's really driving us. We're trying to be a thought leader on biometrics. It's fingerprinting, retina, facial recognition. That's been kind of a big thing. We're bringing together a lot of members on school security and safety. That's always been, since I've been at SIA the past few years, that's been a big issue for us, especially with recent events in the last couple of years, just making sure that kids and students feel safe as possible while they're at school learning. And now, especially with the pandemic, it's even making it a little bit more interesting to kind of gauge that security wise. So just a few of those issues, and of course many more down the road as new issues comes up. I mean, cannabis is a new market for us, so we're hoping that we kind of go into other areas. Maybe smart cities is another big issue that we can maybe delve into. So it's exciting stuff. I mean, the industry is growing, it's becoming bigger, and it's more important. So.
And SEIA.org is where we can find all the information, correct?
Yes, securedindustry.org is where you can find information on best practices and so forth. So, yeah.
Perfect. And Keith, summarize Drake for us.
Well, I don't know if I can summarize all that. I just, the one question I have is, did you get to sample any product while you were putting all this stuff together?
Unfortunately, no. So there you go. There's that. But it is, I live in DC and recreational use is allowed here. So that is one interesting fact. But
no
yeah, there you go.
Here. I just thought I'd throw a little humor your way.
No, all good. I appreciate it, though.
Yeah.
All right. So again, thank Drake Jamali for coming on the program. I really appreciate it. It was very, very informative, and definitely have you back. Some of these other topics we'll look at, because that's what we try to do here on What's Your Perspective, is provide everything in the physical security industry for people to understand what's happening and the new trends and different things. And we learned a lot from that. And people need to definitely go ahead and download the Cannabis Guide and really look and delve into this industry more, because it's going to grow leaps and bounds. And that's an opportunity for many integrators to find opportunities. So definitely look into that more. And I appreciate you stopping by, Drake.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Neil. Thanks, Keith. Happy to be on.
All right. So everyone needs to check out LENSEC Live, lensec.com/live to check out all of our other live shows. And also you can follow us on all social media platforms. So I appreciate everyone watching live. What's Your Perspective? And take care, everyone.